climate change and wildlife. So, you guys know what climate change is? Like kind of
Yes,
an idea? Yes? Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so climate change just means like long-term changes in Earth's temperature and weather patterns. So, basically, right now we're facing a lot of climate change. As you probably know, have you guys been feeling that summers is getting really hot every year? Like every year it's getting hotter and winter is becoming like less cold. That's basically because of climate change right now. All right, let's get started. All right, so our objectives today is to define climate change and what causes it, explain how it affects animals and their habitats, learn about the greenhouse effect, and discover ways to reduce your own carbon footprint. All right, so we kind of talked about what climate change is. So, climate change is a long-term shift in the Earth's temperature and weather patterns. So while the Earth's climate has been changing naturally over millions of years, the rapid warming we're seeing now is mostly due to human actions. So especially after the Industrial Revolution, when we started using factories and machinery, we've definitely have been burning more amounts of coal, oil, and gas for energy, and this is causing the Earth to rapidly rise in temperature. So these activities, like the ones we talked about, like factories that release coal, oil, and gas into the atmosphere, these causes the earth to become really, really warm. And this warming affects more than just the temperature. So it doesn't just change how hot it is outside, but it actually changes how much it rains, and it can lead to lots and lots of droughts and even hurricanes, which we have down here in Texas. It can melt glaciers. So in Antarctica, a lot of the glaciers are melting, and it raises sea levels. So everyone's actually being impacted by climate change, including animals, ecosystems, and even us humans are struggling to adapt to all of these fast changes. So let's talk about causes of greenhouse gases and fossil fuels. Also, if you guys have any questions, you guys can just unmute and tell me because I can't see any of your faces on here. So just let me know if you guys have any questions on any of this. So let's talk about some greenhouse gases. So greenhouse gases, that includes burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas, and these release carbon dioxide and methane, which is really bad for our atmosphere. So these gases actually come together and they form something called a blanket, and this actually warms up our planet. So if the blanket becomes very thick due to all of these gases going into the atmosphere, it can trap a lot of heat and basically Earth is overheating. So this leads to something called global warming, which is definitely the main driver of climate change. And again, it's just not Earth getting hotter and hotter every year. It's actually impacting our ocean, our weather, and our ecosystems. All right, let's talk about some impact on our animal friends here. So animals rely on stable habitats. Like you as humans, you want a stable home. You want to make sure that there is nothing going on that's changing drastically in your lifestyle. So animals are the same way. They want to live in an environment where it is nice and cozy, it is comfortable. Let's talk about a few examples here. So here I have three different types of things that live on Earth and are currently being impacted by climate change. So the first one is polar bears. You've probably heard about, the ice melting in the glacier areas, and polar bears are actually one of the ones that are being impacted by this because polar bears live on these icebergs, and this is where they hunt for their food. So there's less ice, there's less places for them to roam. As you can see in this picture right here, we have a polar bear that's standing on this lone ice, and you don't see any ice around this. This is actually really dangerous for them because one, it's hard for them to actually find food. Polar bears, they rely on these ice places to hunt for food, such as seals and penguins. But without it, they can actually lose a lot of hunting grounds, and it forces them to swim long distances or actually starve to death, which is definitely not good. Our second one over here are coral reefs. Coral reefs are pretty cool. You've probably seen some in movies or you've seen them in real life. But coral reefs, they come in all sorts of colors and stuff. But ocean warming is actually causing thousands of these species to die because coral reefs are actually very sensitive to the temperature changes. So they need to stay in a temperature where it is nice and warm but also not too warm because this can actually cause them to die from something called heat stress. And this heat stress from all this heat and stuff can actually cause something called ocean acidification, also known as coral bleaching. So, like in this picture right here, you can see that this coral, which probably once was a really nice color, like blue, pink, or red, is now actually white because of something called coral bleaching. And it's not just these coral reefs that are being impacted from the ocean, it's all sorts of marine lives. Think about all the animals that live in the ocean. So think about whales. Whales have to migrate every year, depending on temperature, but this raising temperature can actually cause them to shift their migration patterns, and it can definitely disrupt where they go throughout the season. So some things that can happen is they can actually arrive either too early at their location or then go too late and they actually end up missing a lot of the things they need, including food and breeding grounds. So even a small little temperature change for us is actually a huge impact on all these things that live in the ocean. I kind of touched base on this already, but the third thing is migration. So right here, I have some really cool monarch butterflies. Monarch butterflies are actually pretty endangered right now because they are actually losing a lot of the land that they use for breeding. Monarch butterflies, if you didn't know, they can only eat milkweed plant. And because of all the droughts and stuff that are going on, a lot of the plants aren't actually growing this year. And this can cause our monarch butterflies to shift how they travel from Canada all the way down to Mexico. They can take unexpected routes or they can never make it to their destination, which is lowering the number of monarch butterflies we have left on Earth. So it is really important that we are not impacting so much of this, or one day monarch butterflies can actually go and sting. Let's talk about some science. Okay, so think about it like this. Visualize the greenhouse effect as sunlight entering the Earth's atmosphere, but heat getting trapped inside. So think about the Earth. The Earth is constantly getting heated up by the sun. But because of all these dangerous gases that are forming, they're forming a blanket. So actually, none of the gas is escaping. So the earth is just getting hotter and hotter, and it actually is not cooling down, which is really, really bad. You can think about it like if you are sitting next to a fireplace and you have a blanket on, and it's getting so hot, but you can't take your blanket or your jacket off, and you're just warming up. You'll eventually become so warm that you'll start to sweat and stuff. That's kind of like what the earth is facing right now. It's getting so hot on earth, and none of the air is escaping, so it's just getting warmer and warmer. So as we talked about, it actually is really bad because it causes ice to melt, it causes oceans to rise, and lots of storms are getting intensified. Think about all the recent floods we've been having here in Texas. A lot of it is actually due to climate change. Because of climate change, a lot of storms are getting worse and worse. Like, think about all the hurricanes we've been seeing these past few years. They're getting more destructive each time. So it actually is really dangerous for us from all of this global warming. So yeah, yes. Okay. So yeah, understanding this can actually help us see how everything is connected, how this global warming is connected to how we use our energy, how we emission different gases into the atmosphere, how it impacts our animals, and how it impacts our weather and climate. Let's talk. So we talked about kind of how all of this climate change is impacting our wildlife friends, but let's actually talk about how it impacts different types of habitats. So we talked about a few. We talked about the ice melting, but there's definitely so much more. There are droughts, like over here in this picture over here, you can see a tree. It is in a very dry area, and this is caused by temperature rising. There can be less rainfall, and so forces are actually getting hotter and hotter, and they're actually getting dry too. Think about it. If there's no water, the plants are going to become very dry. And what happens to that? It causes wildfires. You guys probably saw some really intense wildfires in California last year. So that's exactly what happened. California is actually facing a lot of drought right now. California is a huge desert and it does not receive a lot of rainfall every year. But because of all of these climate changes that are happening, they're actually receiving less and less rainfall every year. And it causes these huge fires to happen, which can destruct many wildlife spaces, but also homes where people live. I used to live in California, and I can tell you that every year that I lived there, the fires got worse and worse. It got so bad that when you walked on the street, you would see ashes everywhere. You would see ashes on the floor, on your car, on your house. It was insane. And it is all due to these rising global temperatures causing these really bad wildfires. And again, our Arctic friends over here. So in the Arctic, lots of sea ice is melting early in the year and forming later, which is a disaster for animals, as we talked about, like our polar bears, seals, and walruses, who depend on these ice areas for sleeping, for hunting, and for raising their young ones. Many young animals, they cannot survive in just water alone. They need places to walk, to sleep. And with all these rising temperatures and less ice, it is actually very impactful to the species that live there. And we also talked about how if the ices are melting, that means the ocean is warming up too. And this can affect a lot of where the food sources go. So think about it, like shrimp and fish, they go where the temperature is nice. But if the temperature is becoming really, really warm, they might actually migrate to other places. And this can break lots and lots of food chains. Think about all the animals that rely on these foods, like whales and even seabirds. They may actually struggle to find out where their food's coming from. So this can cause a lot of animals to change how they're finding their food, and it's really destructive. And yeah, when they change, when any of these animals change any of their habits on any of these ecosystems, it actually leaves them with a few choices. They can either move to a different place where it is more like their normal habitat, or they can adapt to their new areas. But this is very rare as evolution takes a long time for them to adapt to these new ecosystems. Or the third option, which is really sad, is that they might just die. They might starve and die because they cannot acclimate to this new environment fast enough for them to survive and live on. So that's why it is really important that we take note of how all of this climate can actually impact all of these habitats. So we talked about so many negative things, but there's actually a lot of positive things that are actually happening to make sure that this is not going to become a huge, huge problem in the future, but actually it's being addressed. The number one, the UN Sustainable Development, they are actually creating lots of global climate goals to reduce this emission. So a lot of things you've probably seen are like solar panels. Does anybody have solar panels at their house? Or does your friends have any solar panels? I know my friends have solar panels in California. It's very sunny over there, so a lot of people
No,
have solar panels.
no, but like in our area, like where I live, there's some houses with some solar panels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
Like a few 1 block away from my house, there's like a neighbor that has solar panels, and then one time a hurricane came, we saw that they had their lights were still on, and um when their lights went out.
Yeah, yes. Solar panels are actually awesome. Like you talked about the hurricanes. I know some of my neighbors who have solar panels. They had energy too, but we didn't because my house doesn't have solar panels. So you can kind of see how useful solar panels are because in case of an emergency like the hurricane we had last year, they still had energy, which is really, really cool. Another type of renewable energy there is something called wind power. Have you guys seen any windmills? I know there's not a lot in Texas, but have you guys seen them in like other states or other
Yes.
countries?
Well,
Yes. Pretty cool, right? They're
yeah.
awesome.
It
They can
helps.
generate a lot of energy.
Yeah. So like whenever it's hot, like they can like like the the windmill, it gives like some wind, and then like you can feel the wind because of the windmill, and it's great because it I think it helps like the plants grow.
Yeah, wind energy is actually a really good source of energy. It's very clean, it's renewable, so it means that it can be used over and over again without taking in stuff. And it actually is very efficient. It can actually power a lot of homes and businesses with just a single mill, which is awesome. The third type of renewable energy we're going to talk about is hydro energy. Has anybody seen any of those hydro dams? They're pretty awesome. They usually have them by like waterfalls and stuff where there's a lot of running water and it can generate a lot of cool and clean energy.
Sadly, no.
No, you guys haven't seen any? Oh my gosh, I can see if I can pull up a picture for you guys. Just this past week, I was at a hydro dam, and this hydro dam is located in Baltimore, Maryland, if anybody has ever been. And this hydro plant actually is super cool. This little small waterfall generates enough energy to power 50% of Maryland. Think about that. That's pretty awesome, right? And
Yes.
Maryland's a pretty, it's not a big state, but it's almost a whole state, which is pretty crazy. So water power is actually very beneficial because it's clean energy and it actually is very efficient. It can make a lot of energy. So let's talk about some of these things up here that I have. So the first one is the UN Sustainable Development, but specifically their goal number 13. So their goal number 13 is something called climate action. So it encourages countries to reduce emissions and prepare for climate impacts and educate their citizens. Like we kind of talked about a few weeks ago, we talked about plastic pollution. We talked about deforestation. So the UN also protects clean energy. So they want to make sure that countries are instituting laws and regulations for climate action, as well as all the other things we talked about, like plastic pollution and deforestation. These are all goals that the Sustainable UN wants to implement to make sure that we're keeping our Earth nice and clean. As we talked about renewable energy, so within these past few years, renewable energy like solar panels, like we talked about, are becoming more and more popular because these produce electricity without burning those fossil fuels that we talked about. So fossil fuels are very harmful, as we talked about. They can cause the Earth's temperature to rise and cause for gas not to escape the atmosphere, which is really, really bad. Reforestation and conservation. As we all know, trees give us oxygen. And with the rising temperatures, there's not much trees left for us to, take in all that carbon dioxide that's going in the atmosphere. So reforestation, like we talked about in our deforestation lesson, is also very beneficial. So planting lots of trees to absorb all this carbon dioxide and also rebuild the homes of animals that lost them due to something like forest fire or storms. So supporting areas like the National Park Service can help conserve forests and save our biodiversity. And our last one, greener transportation and waste reduction. So a lot of big cities are actually redesigning transportation for it to be greener. So there's more bike lanes, electric buses, and better recycling programs. So I don't know if you guys ever been to any big cities like Washington, D.C., or any of those really, really, really big cities. They're actually implementing a lot of these clean energy sources. So like bike riding, electric scooters that are solar paneled. I don't know if you guys seen any of these, but those are super awesome, super fast way to get across the city and also not using any fossil fuels. Has anybody ever done any of that? It's pretty fun, right? I don't think they have them in Houston, but if you ever go to a really big city, I'm pretty sure there are bikes and stuff for you to use, and it's definitely conserved a lot of energy, which is awesome. And waste reduction. A lot of cities are now implementing strict recycling laws in which that you have to recycle this certain thing and you're not allowed to throw this away. And all of these actions, whether it's something really big like a whole solar panel factory or like just a small thing like riding your bike instead of driving, all of these come together and it actually help reduces our carbon footprint. So what can you do? Okay, I have a lot of tips on how you guys can help our Earth. So the first one is walking or biking. I know it is really hot in Texas, but there's actually another way you can do this. Does anybody here ride the school bus in the morning?
No, our school bus doesn't have a school bus.
No, but I'm going to ride it for middle school.
Ooh, awesome, awesome. Yes. It's okay if your school district doesn't have a school bus, but one of the ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint is actually using car rides. Even if you don't have access to a bus, doing something, have you guys ever done something called carpooling, like riding the car of your friend or another family member? that actually saves a lot of fossil fuels because you're only using one car. But also, you can also walk or bike. It's kind of hard to do that here in Texas because it's very hot, but it's some good ways for you to reduce your carbon footprint. Also riding the bus. Riding the bus saves a lot of fossil fuels because a bus can carry a lot of students instead of them going in their own personal cars and going to school. That saves a lot of fossil fuels, which is super cool. The next one, unplug devices when not in use. So, if you guys didn't know, even if you have a phone charger or an iPad charger or a Nintendo charger, any of those electronics you have that need to be charged, even if you unplug your device from it and you leave the charger in the wall, it is actually still sucking energy out. So, in the mornings, you may be taking your computer to school, but you leave your charger at home and it's still plugged into the wall. That charger is actually still taking energy. So your parents are still paying for all that energy, even though you're not charging anything, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Like, that's a lot of energy. So by unplugging these devices, you can actually reduce the amount of energy your house is using. So now that ever since I learned about that, I like to unplug all of my chargers before I go out or bring them with me when I'm not using them because they actually steal a lot of energy, energy that you're not even using. So it's very, very harmful. And a lot of people don't know that. Then the third one would be to eat more plant-based meals. So a lot of meat, especially cows. So if you really like beef, it actually is kind of bad for our environment because cows actually produce something called methane in their when they fart, when they poop, they produce a lot of methane. And this creates a lot of greenhouse gases that actually cause the big blanket that we talked about for all the heat to be trapped in Earth. So by eating more plant-based meals, even if you don't like vegetables, but by reducing the amount of beef you eat, especially, it can definitely help save the Earth because these animals produce a lot of methane and it is not good for our environment. So just buying more veggies or more grains the next time you go grocery shopping could definitely help save our environment. And our favorite are three R's: reuse, recycle, and reduce, which we talked about in the past few weeks in every lesson. Continue to do that, you know, reuse and reduce your stuff. If you have plastic bottles that you have from drinking water, maybe start recycling those and switch over to your own personal water bottle that can be reused. That's saving a lot of plastic. But recycling anything at home that you have, paper, cans, plastic bottles, newspaper, that can all be recycled and be used over and over again. A fun fact that I did forgot to share with you guys in our deforestation lesson is that toilet paper can actually be reused up to 7 times before it is completely just wasted. So that toilet paper that you flush down the toilet every time, if it's being recycled, it can actually be recycled 7 times before it is completely useless, which is pretty awesome if you to say. I know there's a company out there that actually makes toilet paper out of recycled toilet paper, which is pretty awesome. So paper is actually really recyclable, but we actually need to recycle our paper more because of how many times it can be used over and over again. So again, saving our trees, but also reducing. As we talked about, let's reduce our plastic usage, like in our plastics lesson. Let's stop using some straws. Let's recycle our plastic and making sure we're not using any plastics when we don't have to, because making all that plastic actually causes a lot of energy and again can raise the temperature of Earth. And of course, avoid fast fashion. I know you probably go to school and there's a lot of trends going on, like trendy clothes, trendy shoes, and you may want to buy all the stuff, but a lot of it actually ends up in the landfill after a few wears, and some people just don't want it anymore. So that actually can cause all this pollution going on and it's not good for Earth. So, choose sustainable brands, brands that are made in a sustainable way and they support this mission. Or, thrifting is fun. You can always find secondhands that are nice and clean and they look new. That actually saves a lot of the stuff that we use and it helps our planet and the animals and it helps everyone in all. So let's do a few discussions. So, what animal do you think is most at risk from climate change? It can be any animal. Like, what is your favorite animal, and how do you think they're actually suffering from this climate change?
Um. Okay. I know one about to go extinct. They said this on the news too. Is one of my favorite animals, oxalotos.
Yes, oxalotls.
Um. They said, well, almost like 100 left in the ocean. People kept on fishing them, like keep on getting them out the water and polluting
Mhm.
the water.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. Yes, I've seen that on the news too. So axolotls, there's lots of axolotls in pet stores, but there's actually, as you said, there's less than 100 left in the wild, and they live in this specific river in Mexico. So because of all this climate change, the water is getting hotter and hotter, and as you said, more pollution and stuff. And this is causing axolotls to struggle to continue on. So that's great. Yes, definitely. Axolotls are definitely at risk right now. Any other animals?
So another animal, like I like, um, my favorite animal is the sea turtle,
Yes.
and it's in danger because like people they throw stuff like on the sand, but like the ocean, it kind of like it comes onto the shore and it might take the trash inside the ocean, and the other animals in the sea and the sea turtles, like if it might go to their faces and they might not breathe, and they think it's food, so they probably eat it and they could probably like die.
Yes, absolutely correct. Yes, and I loved how you incorporate stuff that we learned in our past lessons on plastic pollution. That's awesome. Yes, sea turtles are actually at a risk right now too. As we talked about, oceans are getting warmer. Sea turtles can't handle that change, so they have to migrate all sorts of different places, and that changes where they live and also the food sources they eat. I love how you brought up the plastic stuff. Yes, sea turtles are actually struggling to find like real food or eating plastic and stuff, and that's causing them to die and stuff. So definitely not good. You guys are all so good. That is so awesome. I love how you guys remembered everything and you guys are incorporating it into all of our lessons. That's awesome. Okay, so we don't have a lot of time for another discussion, so we're gonna take talk about our take home action. So this is your homework for this week. So let's choose one habit to improve this week. So I have three different challenges here that you can choose from. You can either unplug your devices, like we talked about. If you're not charging your devices, unplug that charger from the wall. Save your parents some energy. Take because they're actually stealing all of your energy. So make sure you unplug your devices. Walk or bike. If you live somewhere where it is close to go to places like the movie theaters or a store, let's walk or bike or carpool, as we talked about, to save some fossil fuels. Or three, which is one of our challenges from last week too, let's avoid plastics, especially single-use plastics like straws and plastic water bottles, because it can impact our ocean friends like the sea turtle, like we talked about. So you guys can choose any of these that you guys want to improve on. And then in the next session, we're going to talk about which one did you guys try to do? It can be any one of these. Doesn't have to, you can do all three of them if you want. That would be awesome. But you can choose any one you want. And you can talk, and we're going to talk about what was hard or what was easy about changing that habit. And then the third one would be, did anyone notice or ask you why you're doing that? So we're going to talk about that next week. So just kind of keep in mind on what you would like to try out this week and take note on whether people see you make change or was it easy or hard to adjust to this new lifestyle. But remember, like all of these small actions done by multiple people can eventually lead to a big change. So even just taking part of this little challenge, it can actually cause a huge difference. So definitely share it with your family members, with your friends, and with a community, it can actually change a lot. So definitely really cool. So that is it for me this week.